everyone. Welcome back to Not a Movie Buff, the podcast where we talk about the stories we love, why they work, and sometimes why they absolutely shouldn't. If you're tuning in for the first time, I appreciate you being here. And if you've been listening since the pilot, thank you for coming back. You already know how we do things around here. Now, let's talk about sequels. Here's the thing about them. They sound like a great idea until you realize how rarely they actually work. A studio, they see dollar signs. The writers see deadlines. The audience, well, we're somewhere in the middle. We're hoping that lightning can strike twice. That's the tricky part. You can only surprise people once. The first movie gets to be bold, mysterious, unexpected. By the time a sequel comes around, we already know the tricks. We know the characters, the tone, the formula. So the challenge becomes, how do you take something familiar and make it feel brand new again? Most sequels don't even try. There's a cinematic version of reheating leftovers. Technically food, but the flavor's gone. The storylines get bigger, but emptier, like a fireworks show that runs out of spark halfway through. Characters that once had purpose start to feel like mascots, and the studio's goal quietly shifts from storytelling to survival. You can almost feel the marketing meeting behind it. What if we add just another villain, or another explosion, or another joke that was funny once? And yet, every so often, something magical happens. A sequel comes along that shouldn't work. Too much time has passed, the hype is gone, or the first movie ended perfectly, and somehow it does work. Not just as a continuation, but as an evolution. It digs deeper instead of wider. It builds, it refines, it matures. And that's when you realize that the best sequels aren't just trying to copy success. They're chasing meaning. I think that's why we root for them. Because deep down, sequels are about second chances, the same way people are. They're proof that maybe the story wasn't finished yet. That maybe there's more to learn, more to say, more to feel. It's the difference between repeating a memory and rewriting it. But let's be honest, making a sequel that works, it takes guts. You're not just fighting audience expectations, you're fighting your own history. Everyone already knows what you did before, and they've built it up in their heads. So now you've got to top nostalgia itself. And nostalgia doesn't lose easily. That's why most sequels fail. They're too afraid to grow. They want the same applause without the same risk. They play it safe, recycling beats from the first movie and hoping nobody notices. But the ones that succeed, they do something braver. They stop chasing the past and start expanding the future. That's the magic zone. The rare sequel that earns its existence by understanding what made the first one special while daring to ask what's next. It's not about being bigger, it's about being better. Better written, better paced, better connected to the heart of the story. And the crazy thing is, when a sequel does pull it off, it doesn't just make the first movie look good, it makes it mean more. Think about it. Every great sequel changes how you see the original. It reframes the story. It deepens the characters. You go back to the first one and suddenly you noticed all the threads that were there the whole time. That's what the best follow-ups do. They make the world feel larger, the stakes feel heavier, and the emotions hit harder. I've always found that fascinating. This idea that a second chapter can make the first one feel complete. It's like a song that didn't know it needed harmony until the sequel showed up with the right note. And when it works, it's almost emotional because it's rare. It's proof that a story can grow up with its audience, that creativity doesn't have to fade after the credits roll. That's what we're exploring today. The rare times when a sequel refuses to be just more of the same. When it evolves instead of imitates. When it earns its place not by being louder, but by being smarter. Because for every lazy cash grab that makes you roll your eyes, there's that one follow-up that reminds you why you fell in love with movies in the first place. And those are the ones worth celebrating. Let me start this off by saying this up front. I'm not the biggest fan of the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy at all. That may be a bold statement in some corners of the internet, but it's the truth for me. I can get why people love it. I do. It has a campy charm. It has heart. It has sincerity. But for me, it's not my Spider-Man. It's never really been my Spider-Man. That being said, Spider-Man 2 deserves its respect. It's one of those rare sequels that even a skeptic has to step back and say, okay, yeah, they got this one right. The first movie, it set the tone. It reintroduced the superhero genre after years of studios treating comic book movies like Saturday morning cartoons with the budget. It was fun, it was colorful, it was accessible, but it was also rough around the edges, more proof of concept than perfection. Then Spider Man 2 came along and, against all odds, found the balance. It took everything the first movie fumbled and actually built on it. The storytelling slowed down, the emotional beats hit harder, and the characters started feeling real. Peter Parker wasn't just a nerd who looked into powers anymore. He was a guy trying to balance the weight of the world with the rent bill and overdue homework. He wasn't just saving the city, he was fighting for a sense of identity. And that struggle is what makes Spider Man 2 one of the most relatable superhero movies ever made. It's not just about web slinging, it's about burnout, about what happens when the thing you're great at starts draining the joy out of you. That's a universal story. Anyone chasing a dream or carrying responsibility they didn't ask for knows what that feels like. And to Raimi's credit, he lets Peter fall apart. He doesn't fix it with a pep talk or a last minute miracle. He just lets him be tired. That train sequence, it's a perfect example. It's one of the most iconic superhero moments ever put to screen, not just because of the action, but because of the vulnerability. Peter doesn't save that train because he's stronger than everyone else. He saves it because he refuses to give up. He gives everything he has, and for once, the city saves him. It's a rare moment of balance, the hero and the people he protects finally meeting halfway. Now, you can't talk about this movie without mentioning Doc Ock. Alfred Molina's performance is the definition of nuance, a villain with ambition, grief, and tragedy rolled into one. He's not evil for fun. He's driven by the same need for control that Peter fights against every day. That's what makes their dynamic so strong. Ock isn't just a bad guy, he's a mirror. He's what happens when obsession wins. Now, I'll be real. While most people remember the movie for its emotion, my connection came from something else entirely: the game. Because Spider Man 2, it didn't just dominate theaters in 2004, it changed gaming forever. And I don't say that lightly. Before this, superhero games were okay. The first Spider Man game in 2002, it had its moments, but let's be honest, you weren't really swinging through New York. You were climbing webs through the air, shooting into the sky, pretending it was fun. It may have looked cool, but it didn't feel right. Then Spider Man 2 dropped, and suddenly everything changed. It was like somebody finally figured out what being Spider Man should actually feel like. The web swinging was physics based. Every swing had momentum, weight, timing. If you let go at the wrong angle, you'd lose speed. If you nailed the rhythm, though, you could glide through Manhattan like a pro. It was immersive in a way that no superhero game had ever been. And that's what blew me away. The movie made you understand Peter Parker's heart. The game made you understand his freedom. Together, they created a complete experience. You watched the movie for the emotion and then went home to live it for yourself. Even the small details stuck with people. The random crimes popping up mid-swing, the chatter of New York below, that goofy pizza time mission that somehow became meme royalty years later. It's funny now, but at the time, it was pure joy. That game didn't just give us fun missions, it gave us connection. You weren't just watching Spider-Man save people, you were saving people. That's why this movie and game combo are so special, even to someone who's not a diehard Raimi fan, because they understood something that too many superhero sequels still miss. Being Spider-Man isn't about power or perfection. It's about perseverance. It's about the struggle. It's about that quiet, unglamorous kind of heroism that lives in the moments nobody sees. And the crazy thing? The legacy of Spider-Man 2 still holds up. Even with Insomniac's modern games setting new standards, fans still look back and say, yeah, this is where it started. This was the blueprint. The moment superhero storytelling and gameplay both learned how to grow up. It didn't need 10 villains or endless CGI to make a point. It just needed heart, patience, and a story that understood what growth really looks like. Because that's what Spider-Man 2 is. Not just a sequel that worked, but a sequel that evolved. It took everything that came before and finally got it right. Bigger, yes, but more importantly, better. So let's be honest. Nobody was asking for a Puss in Boots sequel. If anything, people had kind of forgotten that the first one even existed. I know I did. The Shrek universe had been milked dry years ago. We got ogres, donkeys, spin-offs, and memes. So when DreamWorks announced Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, most of us had the same reaction. Why? But then it came out and it was good. Like shockingly good. The kind of movie that sneaks up on you and reminds you that animation isn't just for kids. It's for anyone willing to pay attention. Now, the thing that makes The Last Wish so special isn't just the animation or the humor, it's the honesty. It's a movie about death, not in a dramatic, end of the world kind of way, but in a deeply personal one. It's about what happens when a character who's built his whole identity around being fearless suddenly realizes he's running out of lives. That premise alone is genius. Because for years, Puss was this unshakable ball of confidence. The cool, charming side character who always landed on his feet, literally and figuratively. He was style over substance, a walking punchline in the boots. But The Last Wish takes that swagger and flips it into something raw. It asks, what happens when the thing that made you special becomes the thing that scares you most? That's where this movie shines. It's not just about entertaining, it's existential. It's a story about fear, aging, learning to appreciate the life you have instead of chasing the next one. There's something incredibly human about watching a talking cat realize he's not invincible. He's scared, he's anxious, he's starting to panic about time. And somehow, the movie makes that emotional without losing any of the fun. And then there's death. Literally, the character Death. A wolf with red eyes, dual sickles, and a whistle that sends chills down your spine. It's rare for an animated villain to actually feel threatening, but this one, he's terrifying in the best way. He's not just another cartoon bad guy. He's a presence. He doesn't scream or monologue. He stalks. He waits. And every time you hear that whistle, you know the clock's ticking for Puss. That's what elevates this movie. It treats fear like a character instead of a theme. You don't just hear about it, you feel it. That's not something that we see often in modern animation, especially in family films. The animation style, it does play a big part. You can tell that DreamWorks took a cue from Spider-Verse. The brushstroke textures, the stylized action, the way every frame looks like a painting. But it's not a copy, it's an evolution. It blends the realism of the older Shrek movies with the expressive freedom of 2D art, and it fits perfectly with the story. Every color choice and frame transition feels intentional, soft when it needs to be tender, explosive when it needs to be bold. And then there's the humor, because yes, this is still a Puss in Boots movie. The jokes land, the timing's sharp, and even though it's dealing with some heavy stuff, it never stops being fun. You'll go from laughing 1 minute to genuinely reflecting on your life the next. And that balance, it's hard to pull off. So I think that's what surprised me the most. It's how mature it felt without ever really getting cynical. It doesn't talk down to its audience or try to preach. It just presents a simple truth. Life doesn't last forever. That's what makes it valuable. When you see Puss slowly realize that one life, his last life, can mean more than all 8 before it, it hits you. Because that's something that adults feel all the time. We get so focused on doing more, being more, chasing the next milestone, that we forget to actually live the one we're in. There's this great moment, and I won't spoil the full scene, where Puss finally faces death without running. And for the first time, he's not fearless because he has extra lives to burn. He's fearless because he's accepted that fear doesn't have to control him. And that's powerful, especially in a world and an industry that's terrified of slowing down. That's why The Last Wish stands out. It's not just a better sequel, it's a better movie. It dares to be sincere in a landscape full of sarcasm. It tells a story about mortality through the eyes of a cat in leather boots and somehow manages to say more about being human than half the live action blockbusters out there. That's what makes it such a perfect example of a sequel that shouldn't have worked. Nobody expected it to. It had every reason to be forgettable. A spin-off of a spin-off from a series that ran out of gas a decade ago. But instead of cashing in on nostalgia, it found something real to say. And when a movie, any movie, manages to do that, it deserves its place in the conversation. Because sometimes, all it takes to make a sequel work is honesty. You don't have to reinvent everything, you just have to mean it. And Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, meant it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't trying to prove itself. It just showed up, told the truth, and earned its moment. Some sequels do try to be bigger. John Wick 2 decided to be smarter. The first John Wick was lightning in a bottle, a revenge story that somehow became a meditation on grief, discipline, and the cost of violence. It was small scale, personal, and almost humble in how straightforward it was. A man, a dog, a car, a purpose. That's it. It worked because it didn't need anything else. So when the sequel was announced, nobody was sure if that lightning could strike twice. Because where do you go after the perfect ending? He got his revenge. He closed the chapter. That story was complete. And yet, chapter 2 pulled off something incredible. It didn't rewrite the rules. It revealed they were part of a much larger book. From the first scene, you can feel the change. The world's bigger, but not louder. We see the same stoic hitman, but now he's in a system. There are codes, favors, politics, an entire underground civilization built on rules and reputation. Suddenly, that simple revenge tale from the first film becomes a mythology. That's the genius of John Wick 2. It's not about escalation through excess, it's escalation through context. It takes the man and the mission we already know and asks, what kind of world would allow someone like John Wick to exist? And the answer is equal parts elegant and terrifying. The Continental isn't just a hotel anymore, it's a culture. There are branches, currencies, consequences. Everyone speaks this strange, polite language of death. Favors traded like currency, loyalty signed in blood. And somehow, it feels grounded. It's ridiculous, sure, but it's organized ridiculousness, a fantasy world that operates with the discipline of reality. That balance is why this sequel works so well. It never mocks its own world, it treats it with complete sincerity. No winks at the audience, no ironic one-liners. Every rule is treated like gospel, and that makes the absurd believable. Visually, it's just as disciplined. The camera isn't chasing chaos, it's choreographing it. You can feel the thought behind every angle, every gunshot, every reload. It's brutal, but it's graceful. Violence as ballet. And that's not me exaggerating. It's literally structured like choreography. The rhythm of movement, the framing of silhouettes against neon, the silence that hits before each strike. It's not about the body count, it's about control. You can tell the director is a former stuntman because the camera respects the performers. No shaky cam, no cheap edits. He lets the choreography breathe, which gives the violence weight. You see Wick's exhaustion, his technique, his focus. It's not just an assassin shooting bad guys, it's a man calculating survival, one bullet at a time. And underneath that control is something deeper. Inevitability. In the first movie, John fought for closure. Here, he fights because he has no choice. He's not the monster people fear, he's the monster they made. He can't leave the life because the life won't let him. That's tragic, and the movie knows it. There's a moment late in the film where John realizes the system he once served has no mercy left for him. He's excommunicated, cut off from the only community he's ever known, and for the first time, you see fear flicker behind that calm expression. It's subtle, but it's there. That's what gives this story its humanity. Beneath all the style and precision, it's still about loneliness, about a man trapped in his own legend. That's what separates John Wick 2 from almost every other modern action sequel. It's not trying to outdo itself, it's trying to outthink itself. It wants to understand the cost of its own world building. Every bullet fired has meaning. Every rule broken has consequence. Every alliance has an expiration date. It's rare for an action franchise to age gracefully, but somehow Wick 2 feels mature. It's colder, heavier, quieter. A movie that trusts silence more than spectacle. And that trust pays off because it makes every outburst count. When the chaos comes, it feels earned. By the end, the movie doesn't just expand the universe, it transforms the man. John's not fighting for peace anymore. He's fighting for identity. He's not the Baba Yaga anymore. He's a relic. A myth in motion, trying to find where the man ends and the legend begins. That's why John Wick Chapter 2 shouldn't have worked, but did. It refused to cheapen what came before it. It didn't chase size or noise, it chased clarity. The rare kind of focus that most sequels lose the moment they get comfortable. And in doing that, it elevated the whole series because a great sequel doesn't need to reinvent the story, it just needs to sharpen it. And John Wick 2 is a masterclass in sharpening, a sequel that turned a simple revenge film into modern mythology, one precise bullet at a time. Now, if you want to talk about a sequel that shouldn't have worked, The Best Man Holiday is right near the top of that list. 14 years had passed since the first movie, y'all. 14! Most of the time, when a sequel takes that long, it ends up being a reunion nobody asked for. Awkward nostalgia, recycled jokes, and characters who feel like parodies of their younger selves. But somehow, this one did the impossible. It grew up. When The Best Man came out back in 1999, it was this smart, funny, relatable story about friendship, love, and pride, told through the lens of young, successful black professionals trying to figure out who they were. It was fun, but it also had that edge of realness, that sense of, I know these people. It felt familiar in a way a lot of movies didn't at the time. So, when the sequel dropped over a decade later, nobody was sure what to expect. Were these characters still relevant? Would it just be the same story with older faces? The Best Man Holiday took all those doubts and flipped them into strength. It didn't try to recreate the first movie, it built on it. It understood that time changes people, and it let that reality drive the story. These weren't the same characters from 99. They'd grown, stumbled, succeeded, and hurt. And that's what made it work. This time, the story wasn't about who was dating who or what was about to blow up the group chat. It was about legacy, family, faith, about reconnecting when life has knocked you around a little. The movie knew its audience had grown up too, and it met them where they were. That's rare for any sequel, but especially one that came from a comedy. And here's what really hits about The Best Man Holiday. It's emotional without feeling manipulative. You laugh with these characters, then suddenly you're hit with something that feels real. Loss, grief, the reminder that time doesn't wait for anybody. When Mia's illness comes into focus, the tone shifts, not abruptly, but gracefully. You can feel the weight of it settle in the room. And what's beautiful is how the movie doesn't run from it. It leans into it. It reminds us that laughter and heartbreak don't cancel each other out. They coexist. There's a moment near the end, again, no spoilers, but if you know, you know, that hits harder than anyone expected. Because it's not just sad, it's earned. It's the kind of emotional moment that only works when you've known these characters long enough to see how far they've come. And that's the secret to why this sequel lands. It respected time. It understood that growing older isn't just about wrinkles and mortgages, it's about perspective. What really stands out to me is how the movie still feels black in the most authentic way possible. It's not performative or stereotypical, it's lived in. You see faith, community, family, joy, pain, all wrapped up in one story without apology. It celebrates the kind of love and friendship that feels uniquely familiar to anyone who's grown up in spaces like that. That representation matters. It's not just seeing black success, it's seeing black vulnerability. And that's something Hollywood still doesn't get right often. Director Malcolm D. Lee didn't just bring the cast back, he brought them back to finish something. To show that friendship evolves, that forgiveness is hard but necessary, that life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. There's growth in every frame. The same people you laughed with 14 years ago are now showing you what it looks like to love through pain, to stay when it's hard, to keep your heart open even after it's been broken. And the performances? Everybody came to work. Tay Diggs, Morris Chestnut, Nia Long, Terrence Howard, they all feel like they've lived with these characters for years. Nobody's phoning it in. They carry the history of the first film on their shoulders, and you can feel it in the smallest interactions, the awkward glances, the forced smiles, the inside jokes that hit differently after everything they've been through. That's the thing about The Best Man Holiday. It's not just a sequel. It's a reunion with people you've grown up with. It's warm, but it's honest. It reminds you that sometimes, where are they now, isn't just a question for tabloids. It's something we quietly ask about ourselves, too. And watching these characters face that question with grace and imperfection makes it hit even harder. So, while The Best Man Holiday could have easily been a lazy nostalgia grab, it turned into something a lot more meaningful. It became a story about life after the glow up, about what happens when the credits roll on the happily ever after and real life begins. And that's what makes it one of the best examples of a sequel that shouldn't have worked, because it didn't try to be younger, louder, or flashier. It just tried to be real. It grew up and it let us grow up with it. If there's one thing all of these movies prove, it's that sequels only work when they actually have a reason to exist. Not just to sell tickets or keep a franchise alive, but to tell the next part of a story that still has something left to say. Most sequels fail because they mistake familiarity for connection. They think if people loved it before, they'll love it again. And that's rarely true. You can't recreate a moment, you can only build on it. The best sequels understand that. They don't chase the feeling of the first movie, they grow from it. A lot of studios think success comes from repetition. They copy the tone, the jokes, even the color grading, and the result feels hollow because repetition doesn't move people, progression does. That's the real difference. And when you look at the great sequels, Spider-Man 2, The Last Wish, John Wick 2, The Best Man Holiday, they all share one thing: intent. They know what they want to explore. They're not trying to one up the original, they're trying to finish the conversation. That's the secret most filmmakers forget. When the first movie asks a question, but the sequel is supposed to give you a new answer. Not the same one, only louder, but a deeper one. In Spider Man 2, the question was, what does responsibility really cost? In Puss in Boots, it was, what's the point of fear if it teaches us how to live? In John Wick 2, it became, what's the price of survival when your past owns you? And in The Best Man Holiday, it asked, how do we hold on to love when time and pain start to change us? All four of those questions come from the same place: growth. Because that's what life really is: sequels stacked on sequels. We go through new chapters, carry old baggage, try to do better than before. And that's what makes a great sequel so powerful. It reflects that same cycle back at us. We're not the same people who watched the first story, and deep down, we don't want to be. That's why the sequels that work never pretend the first movie didn't happen. They embrace the scars, the lessons, the failures, everything that made the first story meaningful. They take what was already good and turn it into something truer. That's not just smart writing, it's emotional honesty. Because whether it's a superhero hanging up the mask, a hitman realizing he's trapped by his own code, or a friend group navigating love and loss, every great sequel does the same thing. It honors the journey. It shows that time isn't the enemy, it's the teacher. And audiences feel that. We may not be consciously aware of it, but when a sequel treats us like we've grown too, we respond. It's why The Best Man Holiday hits differently in your 30s than it would have in your teens. It's why Spider-Man 2 still resonates even after 20 years, because it's not about nostalgia, it's about endurance. These movies remind us that the people we were when we saw the first one have changed. And that's okay. We were supposed to. That's what makes a sequel work. Not a bigger budget or a famous cameo, but understanding. Understanding of what made the original special and the courage to move beyond it. Because growth takes courage, both in life and in art. And when a sequel captures that, when it acknowledges time, change, and consequence, it stops being just another movie. It becomes a continuation of something real, something earned. That's why we connect with them. They mirror us. They remind us that stories, like people, they can evolve. Sometimes that evolution makes them stronger. Because the best sequels don't just extend a franchise. They remind us that endings aren't always endings. Sometimes they're just the next beginning. The thing about sequels is they're never really about the movie. They're about what happens after the moment, what comes next when the credits roll, when the hero's tired, when the story has to grow or fade. Maybe that's why they hit so close to home, because life works the same way. Every one of us has lived through a sequel, starting over after failure, rebuilding after loss, trying again when it would have been easier to quit. Each new chapter of our lives is basically the next film in a series. Same character, new challenges, bigger lessons. We try to make the next version of ourselves better than the last, even when it's messy. That's what growth looks like. That's what great storytelling looks like. When a sequel gets it right, it reminds us that change doesn't erase the past. It builds on it. It turns old moments into stepping stones. It proves that endings can still lead somewhere worth going. That's what keeps us coming back. Not nostalgia, not hype, but hope. Hope that maybe the story isn't over yet, and that maybe, just maybe, the next chapter can still surprise us. Because when you love stories, you don't just want more of them, you want to grow with them. And that's why we keep watching, keep reading, keep showing up. Because every once in a while, the sequel gets it right and reminds us that we can too. Speaking of next chapters, next week we're flipping this whole idea on its head. We're talking about when the industry tries too hard to recreate the magic, it ends up losing what made it special in the first place. It's called the nostalgia trap, when reboots miss the point. And if you've ever watched a remake and thought, this just isn't it, trust me, you'll want to be here for this one. And hey, if you've been enjoying these episodes, don't forget to follow, don't forget to subscribe to Not a Movie Buff wherever you listen. That way, you'll never miss an episode when it drops every Thursday, and it helps this little community grow one listener at a time. I appreciate you for being here, for sharing your time, and for letting me talk movies with you every week. Until next week, I may not be a movie buff, but I'll see you at the movies.